Welcome back on the Leaders Who Care 140th episode of the third season. I am honored to welcome a very special guest, Salvatore Cirillo. Salvatore is the VP HR business partner of Renaissance Learning, and Renaissance Learning is a tailored data-driven solutions aligned to curriculum and national standard to accelerate learning for all children and adults. Something that I'm deeply passionate about, of helping more young people rise and grow. And I am really honored by having you today, Salvatore. Thank you for accepting our invite, but also you have a very interesting background that I would love to hear more, from the US Army to helping young people learn. First of all, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So, tell us more. What brought you to the army first? How did it, and then how it all unfolded to lead as a VP HR? Because you do quite an interesting combination of HR, but also sales, commercial role. Coming from the army background, it is absolutely of interest to me, and incredible to see your path.
I appreciate the question. Leadership actually began for me about around the age of 14. Just when I started high school, I joined the junior ROTC, which is the cadet corps that was built in, I think, World War II as a filter feeder for the Army and the military. So I got exposure to leadership at a really young age, and became really interested in what it meant to lead other people and what it meant to do that well. And then ultimately, I went into the Army Reserve for a couple of reasons. One was money for college. It was an opportunity for me to go and advance my education, but also the experience that I was looking forward to having, some of the training and the discipline and the things that I thought at that point in my life probably would have benefited me. I picked up a number of different, very interesting skills and opportunities to learn, and had several leaders, both good and bad, from whom I learned quite a bit.
And how long did you spend in the army before you actually decided to pursue your career?
I did the standard 6 years and 6 years of 6 years of the Ready Reserve and 2 years of inactive Ready Reserve. So for a total of 8 years. And with the exception of basic training and job training, which was several months kind of consecutively, I spent about 2 weeks a year and 1 week in a month working at my unit, which was in Los Angeles near UCLA. And like I said, learning a number of different skills and from several different leaders, many of whom I still consider today when I'm thinking about leadership roles and what leadership looks like, and also what leadership shouldn't look like. So a lot of good experiences.
Well, what inspired you most from well, go I guess good and bad examples of leadership? I'm sure you can learn as equally as much as when you suffer a lot or when you see a good example. What are those practices or really inspirational leadership that made an impact on you?
There was one leader in particular that I think about often. I won't list his name, but he was a Vietnam veteran, and he was actually somebody who was in the special forces during Vietnam, and in a period when there was a lot of, frankly, turnover and churn, and there were a lot of lives being lost between tours of duty. This is a person who decided to re-enlist and kind of put himself in the line of fire. He saw a gap in what was happening and wanted to ensure that he could support people. And I always thought that was an incredibly selfless act, but he never talked about it. He was one of these people that I learned so much about him from other people that had experienced kind of being led by him or being around him. And for a brief period of time, he was incredibly supportive in my development, my career, and did a number of different things to help me further my path. And so what he represented for me fairly early on was that kind of true model of selflessness and servant leadership, where everything was about putting other people first. And it was with sincerity, right? Like he was genuinely deeply concerned and caring about the people that were in his charge. And that was an inspirational moment and a bit of a light bulb for me about what leadership could look like. I had previously had leaders who were very commanding or who did things, directive. I had a handful of leaders that were very good at delegating and doing the follow up and allowing you to be a part of the process, but still not necessarily letting you lead it. And for the first time with this person, I had an opportunity to see somebody who said, you know what? You have all the capabilities you need to do this. You might require some skills, and I'm going to teach you those skills, but I'm going to empower you to lead. And that became a model for me. And I, like I said, still think about this person to this day.
It's incredible to see these impacts, on us. We remember, like in school, what a great teachers, but not so many of the who are in between.
Yeah,
and
totally.
you have an interesting background in sales leadership, but also recently you combine human resources, HR. Um, Tell us more about this interesting combination of how this came about.
I've been very fortunate in my career. Every company that I've worked for, I've had an opportunity to kind of progress my career. I'm one of those people. I often think about great teams as having a shooting star and a rock star, right?
Yeah.
Rock stars are those high performers that might decide this is the dream job for them. They're going to do it for 30 years, and you're glad to have them because without them, the teams don't move forward. And then you have your shooting stars that kind of bounce from maybe team to team. They want to try something different. Every 2 to 3 years, they're itching for something new. I always thought of myself in that kind of latter state where I was really eager to try on some new way of doing something. And so in the last 3 or 4 companies in particular, I've had a natural career progression across a number of different roles. And in every role, I've had an opportunity to learn from different people, learn new skills. And at my most recent company, the one that I'm still with currently, I've had kind of opportunities to move from revenue operations, where we supported sales, to a chief of staff role for a chief revenue officer, and then ultimately to move in HR, where I'm supporting our sales, marketing, and customer success groups. Um, and for a number of reasons, this has just been an absolute blessing for me. I've had amazing opportunities. I'm learning something new, which is great for me. And I get to continue to be of service to people, which is really at the core of who I am and what I want to focus on. And so anytime I have a job opportunity where I'm going to learn something new or a new industry, I'm always excited. But if at the core I get this opportunity to continue to help people progress in whatever way they'd like to, and so HR seemed like a natural kind of extension of that, where as a chief of staff, I got a lot of opportunities to help. And in HR, I'm getting to expand that scope. So there are more people I get to support and more areas of the business where I get to help people move into the place where they can be most effective.
Oh, it's very interesting. You're part of a strengths finder, and you've mentioned that your greatest growth opportunity have come from outside the comfort zone. How can an introverted leaders get more used to the idea of leaving the comfort zone?
It's a good question. And it's an easy thing to answer, but it's a harder thing to do. Uh, I think in the same way that as we're learning information, we have a tendency to have confirmation bias. We're kind of seeking out the things that affirm our own values and beliefs. We have to strive to push against that. I think that's very true in how we actually operate in the world as well. So in a kind of very practical term, what that looks like for me is, um, again, trying on new roles that otherwise wouldn't have made sense to me. HR being a perfect example. There's a whole industry that I'm trying to learn right now, right? That's a great stretch assignment. It's a great way to make yourself uncomfortable. The same's true for assignments, right? I found myself often volunteering for the task that nobody else wanted.
Hmm.
Um, it wasn't necessarily always the best idea, but it was the one that really pushed me. It really challenged me. I also solicit a lot of feedback from the people in my life, not just the people that I work for, but the people that I work with. And the question is always the same. It's what can I be doing differently or better? And part of the challenge with soliciting feedback is people ask for it, but they don't act on it. And so what I've tried to do is really come up with a way to incorporate that feedback in a meaningful way. I think there's always a little bit of a filter that you take when you're getting feedback from someone else, where you say, is this really true for who I am? I think one of the challenges that we can often find with good leaders versus great leaders is good leaders have a tendency to want to create you in their own image, whereas great leaders want to learn who you are and kind of help to elevate that. And so as I kind of take feedback on, I'm also mindful of who I am and what I want to be as a leader, and whether that feedback moves me toward being more like the person that's giving the feedback or moves me toward being more like the leader that I want to be.
And in terms, I always believe that when there's troubles is a great way to test leadership. And it, what are your really exposure to leadership in times of turbulence? And what is your advice to lead? Because we are living in a time that is not that is quite special, quite difficult, with number of uncertainty at hand, and leadership really plays key role, especially in those times.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I one of the things I really try to do is to be fairly even keeled. When I'm engaging or interacting, I like to think about it as people are coming together, they often have a lot of baggage that they're bringing with them, right? So it's sometimes helpful to visualize that and to think about it. Like, as this person's coming to the table, what are they carrying with them? Um, and I think a lot about what I'm carrying with me and how much that is shaping the conversation that's happening in front of me. So how much am I responding to the person in front of me versus reacting to something from my own past? Or being concerned about the thing that they're trying to accomplish versus concerned about the goals or the agenda that I might have. I
Mm,
share this because I do think it helps in times of turbulence, especially because when there's conflict, when there are agendas, when voices are being raised and people are getting heated, it's usually because there's a need that's not being met or some passion for something that they want to see through. And in those moments, I find it really helpful to kind of take a step back, calm myself, and then try to figure out what it is that that person needs. What is it that they're going for? And how can I maybe support that? And at the same time, support the thing that I'm working on.
yep.
I'm always looking for the win win. And I think in times of turbulence, leaders who lean in with empathy and care and are really going for how can we connect in a meaningful way? How can I figure out what you need versus, kind of what we're both saying in maybe a superficial way, can help us get to a place where there's some common growth, common goals achieved, and hopefully a win-win situation. I'm not sure if that quite answered the question, but it's a thing that I'm very conscious of as I'm having challenging conversations with others.
Absolutely. No, and so talking about this in your current role or current organization, tell us more about Renaissance Learning. What do you guys do? What's the problem that you're solving, and what attracted you to them?
So we're an educational technology company, and to your earlier intro, our mission is to accelerate learning for all, and we're doing that globally right now. So we've got a big presence in the United States, and we continue to expand uh, outside of the U.S. in Europe and Asia, South America, the Middle East. And the goal, really, if I were to simplify it, is to put software in the hands of teachers that allow them to accelerate learning for their students. The goal is being of service to students. And in a time that you mentioned, which can be incredibly turbulent and challenging for young people, our goal is to make their ability to accelerate their learning something that they can do with a little bit more ease, right? And a little bit more comfort.
That's very interesting, and we've been really personally very interested into learning and how it needs to grow and evolve. What is your take on the current situation with, especially the educational system that is in the high school, university, and the times of change and access to so much information? Um, what do you think? What is your personal opinion? Need to develop or change or grow in order for us to become better prepared for the world, or young people to become better prepared, because I see a lot of young people that are uncertain, don't know what to do, mental health issues. So there's like a rise on um, well-being, mental health, and that's sometimes is the question is are we living in such a good time that we produce a lot of weak men? And
Mhm.
because bad times produce strong men. And so the I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on um, what perhaps the future of learning um, could look like or should look like.
Well, I'd say first, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not my company. So, in this way, I would say I'm actually a big fan of Sir Ken Robinson, who talked a lot about this. He passed away a few years ago. Was an incredible leader in this space, but I think the way he framed it is something I think about a lot, which is we can't even begin to conceive of the types of problems they're going to face the generation that's in front of us. Um, the nature and complexity of them is kind of greater than we know. And I think we really need to reevaluate at a core level how our education is giving these young people more exposure and experience and maybe more aligned to their passion, and coupling that with the critical thinking that they need to move forward into a world that, again, we can't really conceive of or define. You talked a little bit about this, Marion, with your Leader Academy, right? It's here's an opportunity to give these young people more experiences and get them a chance to see this world a little bit differently. And maybe even forge some bonds with others that allow them to move forward into this as a group rather than as an individual, right? And so I really think that what we need is we need to think differently about how we educate. We need to really recognize that what's coming, it might be greater than ever before. And so, what are the things that people are passionate about? How can we take those passions and align them with real skills that allow them to move forward and transform the thing that's in front of them in a way that we can't even view or visit in a meaningful way?
Well, that's certainly relate a lot to those, and it's not easily achievable at scale. I think it's we see that in some schools, some universities around the world, but they're like almost institutions on their own, and they have systems. The question is, can that be replicated for the mass or the middle, the majority?
It's a very interesting question. I genuinely wonder that myself. There was a great article in the New York Times recently about what they believe is the best school district in the United States, and they were actually making a case for the United States Army, and the fact that what the U.S. Army schools were doing that's fundamentally different than a lot of the other schools in the country are a few things. Primarily, they were addressing the socioeconomic issues, right? If you are a student on a military base, uh, the reality is that you have at least one parent that is working, and that's the result of being a member of the military. The second thing is you probably have most of your food issues addressed, so you don't have food insecurity, um, as well as you have a consistent education program. So unlike in the states where curriculum can change as a result of a new governor coming in or new legislation, the federal government takes a little bit longer to move, and so as a result, you have very consistent curriculum spreading across any base in the military globally. And then the last thing is how they measure their teachers. I think this is something that the UK does really well, where you have a series of standards, a bit like the way nurses do in the States for teachers, right? And so, to your question about scale and how do you effectively do that, I look to the military, and not just because I was formerly a member, but because I think the reality is they've figured a lot of these things out, right? They've been doing this for 2, 3 plus centuries, and they've been doing it at scale. When you're talking about hundreds of thousands, and if you're talking about over the course of it, millions of people that have gone through this program, you figure a lot of things out. You figure out leadership pretty quickly. You figure out training pretty quickly. You figure out education pretty quickly. You have to, right? To your point, scale creates a level of stress. The same thing that we see with Amazon and its shipping model, right? The pressures of that last mile and how they get the product from their truck to your front door is something that a scale problem is going to create some tension and strain and an opportunity to learn. And so I think very much in the same way that what we're talking about with education and how we deliver it at a different size, there's some chances to look at how this could be bigger. And that's not to say that we need to lose sight of what that individual looks like in that situation, but just recognizing that sometimes that gives us an opportunity to view a situation differently.
Well, that's actually good advice, And the question we have, and could not then governments look at the military training and really take the best practices? Because if you think about it, it's in the same government, but different ministries, different
Yeah,
departments, but it exists within the same field.
it's very true. I actually, I think a lot about this when it came to my military occupational skill, my MOS. I went to Fort Lee, Virginia, and I was working in automated logistics, so a quartermaster. And the thing that I found really fascinating, Marion, is essentially what they do is they say, we're not going to take anything for granted. We're not going to make an assumption about what you know. So if you need to learn algebra to do this job, we're going to teach you algebra. We're not going to assume that you know algebra.
Mm.
If you need to know, a certain level of English, we're going to teach you that level of English. We're not going to assume it. And what they do is they help to provide a really nice gradient that moves up. And so you have this opportunity to develop it over time. And obviously, it's the military, so you still have milestones and tests and metrics and things that you have to meet. But to everything I'm saying, I think what they do well is they say, look, how do we put tens of thousands of people through a program and get them where we need to get them as effectively as possible without losing sight of where they are and what their needs are in that particular circumstance. And so, yeah, I would absolutely point to the military as one of those areas where we can learn.
Do you think there's other areas, other sectors that do this well that the educational system could look up to, especially in business or healthcare? Just thinking of different fields that they are good practices to be looked at.
I'm certain of it, right? I just mentioned the Amazon example when we're talking about scale and delivery. I think that there are corporations that are working to. You mentioned strengths finders earlier, right? Like working to better assess individuals in business situations and to figure out what their skill set is. I actually think in this way, education is further along than corporations are in many respects because, at least in the United States, from K to 12, you're getting a report card pretty regularly. You're getting constant feedback about your progress, right? You have an opportunity to pivot and react based on not just the report cards, but the tests and the quizzes that you're taking, and to get a sense of where you are against a measurable skill. I think the thing that we almost get away from when we become adults and we move into the private sector, or even public corporations do, non-governmental organizations do something similar, is you kind of get in this situation where, unless you have a really strong leader, back to the leadership key component, you might only get a review once a year. You might get a review at a mid-year and an annual review. And so there's your twice a year. But that constant feedback that you need to develop may be lacking. And it makes it really challenging for a lot of people to move beyond that thing. And it goes back to our conversation earlier about what are you doing then to seek out discomfort, to find something new to develop yourself? I think this is where we can actually learn from education a little bit. I know that's not quite the question, but I'm flipping it a little bit. And to say that, in the corporate sector, we probably have some opportunities to look differently at how we move skills forward for individuals and how we challenge them to get to that next level.
Absolutely. I feel there's a lot of best practices to be taken and shared, and I think it's the challenge is always, can you do it at scale?
Yes.
And have consistent results that really make a difference. But I think military is quite a good scale, if you like, of doing that. So, and of course, corporations. But then every corporation has a unique culture, so it needs to be quite a very large size. And without a doubt, for me, always been a dream. How can we connect education and business to be very closely aligned? Of helping people learn skills that is going to help them to fulfill their vision, their mission, but also could be useful in anything they decide to do. So there's certain skills that are transferable and behaviors and the values as well. Um, so what are your future hopes? In other words, what are you passionate about these days? After you achieved so much, what do you dream of? What would you like to see for your personal growth and development?
I appreciate the question. I there are a lot of things on my roadmap, things that I'd like to achieve and accomplish, kind of in my career and then post retirement. I think one of the things that I think about a lot though is how I show up every day, and that really looks like small and consistent acts of service and kindness. I like to think a lot about how I can maybe impact the rest of the world, in a moment, right? In an engagement, in a single conversation with somebody. I think the thought of, having a larger or bigger impact is something that's appealing in a lot of ways for me. Eventually, I'd love to start my own corporation. I've got some ideas about what that would look like. But where I think I kind of get up and I have a lot of power and feel very charged every day is in those interactions. It's when somebody reaches out and they're looking for help, and it's, can I change the course of how they came into that conversation and how they leave it? I was looking at a stat recently that said over the course of the average life, you'd meet 80,000 people. And that out of the 80,000 that you meet, you can influence 10,000 of them. And I know we started the kind of conversation here around how do you influence? And I just imagine if, of the 10,000 conversations or situations where influence is likely to happen, if that person can say in a conversation with me that they walked away feeling better about themselves, they maybe got a little bit of insight into something they didn't know before, and they go out into the world slightly differently, maybe a little bit better. And I don't say that from a place of ego, but where I truly hope that I can help. And also that, I get that in return from whatever interactions I get as well. It's not a long trip to get from influencing, one or two conversations to suddenly over the course of your life, 10,000, and putting yourself in a situation where if those 10,000 people go and influence 10,000 other people in a similar way, the world starts to look like a much better place. So yeah, I would say small and consistent acts of kindness and service are really how I think about operating in the world and how I think about caring. And then to your direct question, I won't necessarily go into the details of some of my ideas, but yeah, I've got some thoughts of next steps in my career, where I'd love to go, but also some business ideas that I'd like to bring to fruition.
And Sal, how do you take care of yourself to sustain that level of energy, passion, love? What are your practices that you give you energy, give you strength?
Um, as you can see from the background, a lot of reading, a lot of downtime. I'm very fortunate to be a solid sleeper, which sounds like a little thing, but it has a big impact. So getting a sound night's sleep. There's a lot of things I do with my family that I really enjoy. One of the big things that I found when I was actually at university in the UK was connecting back with nature. My second year at uni, I was living out, and we had a great place, an amazing house that we were renting, and the room that I was in was facing a bunch of trees. And I found between, kind of long study hours or revising whatever paper that I was working on, if I could take 5 minutes, just kind of stare at those trees as they were moving in the wind, found something very calming about that. In the summer, I'd often go under those trees and read. So that connection to nature is something that I find if I'm having a particularly stressful day, I want to get out and take a walk with my dog, or I want to, do something that connects me back. I find that grounding and very helpful.
Excellent. So, final question that we always ask: if you had unlimited resources or all the resources of the world, what will be one thing you can change or would like to change for a better, more caring world?
It's a big question. All the resources in the world. There's a lot of things that come to mind. I'll go with something that I've been thinking about for a long time, which is I'd love it if we gave young people an opportunity to do three things pretty early on, to give them some more exposure and experience. I think one is a year of service, whatever that looks like. The examples in the States are like Teach for America, or maybe you go into the military. I think 1 year of college. I think that university experience is invaluable, especially when you can get away, and give yourself a chance to live on your own, have your ideas challenged, learn new things from different people and different perspectives, sit in a coffee shop and have a debate with somebody about something that you're certain you know better than they do. And then the third thing would be give them a chance to live a year abroad, wherever that is. I think the exposure to different cultures, different people, gives you a different perspective on the world. And so if you could have a year of service, a year of university, a year of living abroad, um, and make that mandatory, though I know that's easier said than done, but I've got all the resources, so I'm gonna make this worth everybody's while. I think what it does is it helps to round people out, gives them a little bit more exposure and experience to the world that they're a part of, and allows them to think differently and move through the world differently. So that's probably what I would do if I had unlimited resources. Plus, I'd probably go on a really nice vacation. So
Thank you, Sal. That was a very interesting, really, way of looking at this, and really appreciate it. Well, Sal, wishing you really blessings to you, your family, and your team, and thank you for being with us and for being a leaders who care. Very thoughtful and insightful. Thank you for sharing those, and have a wonderful rest of the week.
you as well, Marion. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the time.